Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. Why don't we get started? So let's see how many more pages of. Oh, we're up to page 19. So I have to send you the new set. Okay. All right. So we were still in the middle of Sif Daled yesterday on page Kuf Peches in the Imrei Yaakov. And what we were talking about is the prohibition of striking children, even children that are under your tutelage, unless there is some constructive purpose behind it. And the last thing that we saw was in Sifkat and Lamed Hey, that there are certain things that a father does not have control of. A father cannot control which school or which yeshiva that his son will learn in. So there's no, you can't coerce a child to go to a specific yeshiva, or choice of wife, choice of husband or wife. You cannot force your child to either marry or not marry. All you can do is hold out financially and say, I'm not paying for the wedding, but you don't have a right to tell your child who they should or should not marry. Okay. Let's see. So you're not allowed to strike your children, just like you cannot strike anyone else. And there's a Torah violation involved. And then in Lamed Zayin, the Rav Shulchan Aruch said, if you have a domestic a person in your house that works for you, you're never allowed to strike them, of course. Now, of course, this goes back to medieval times, So you're not allowed to strike them even if they don't listen. Ela imkain hu eved Kanani, unless it's a Canaanite slave. Canaanite slave, you are allowed to strike, but you're not allowed to, like the Torah says, you cannot create any physical injury. Davka shalo, you can only strike your own Canaanite slave. But if you strike your friend's Canaanite slave, then, when slavery was legal, then you're not allowed to strike someone else's slave, and you get malchus shahari chayev b'mitzvos, because this Canaanite slave is obligated in mitzvot, and therefore he has the status of a Jew, at least for these purposes. Aval stam nochri rashay lahakoto avalo lachbobo dehu bichlal nezikin. When it comes to a regular non-Jew, you are allowed to, there's no prohibition of striking him, of getting, let's say, involved in a fight with a non-Jew. But to cause injury gratuitously, that you'd have to pay nezikin. Just like you're not allowed to steal from a non-Jew, you would also, if you damage a non-Jew in some way through your aggression, then you'd have to pay for full damages. Okay. So I guess the question would become, let's say I want to be a boxer. Is boxing a legal thing for a Jew to get involved in? There have been a couple of frum boxers. At least I know of one. I think they called him the Lion of Zion or something like that. And I think then afterwards he got smicha. He became frum through Chabad. You know who I'm talking about? Anyway, okay. So boxing is probably not a sport that any Jew should lechatchila engage in, because number one, it's from an aggression standpoint, it's not something that a Jew should be doing to be striking others. It probably would be an Isser Deoraisa to engage in it if the opponent is a Jew. But if the opponent is a Gentile, it might be considered permissible, provided that you're prepared to make compensation for any permanent damage that you cause to the non-Jew, or he signs a waiver that he holds you blameless, which is probably what boxers have to what they do anyway before they go into the ring, I would imagine. But that's the only thing I can imagine that, under what other circumstances would we say that it's permitted to strike a Gentile? The only other thing would be for self-defense. Yeah.
He wants to make a living, right?
I suppose, well, listen, what did we say? You're not allowed to subject yourself to injury, even by granting permission. I don't, to put yourself in a ring and subject yourself to getting pummeled may also be usher because it's not your body. You don't remember we saw it's Hashem's body, and you don't have a right to abuse it. So I guess the argument would be that if you feel confident that you can protect your body. Well, that's the difference. You see, with hockey and football, it's not the whole nature of the game. The nature of the game is not to get knocked out and not to get injured. The nature of boxing is to injure the other party so much that he can't fight anymore because he's been disabled. Well, I'm not sure because martial arts is also different from boxing. I'm not sure. You see, martial arts is technique. What's UFC? Is that mixed?
Boxing and kicking and
everything. Right. Yeah. The stuff that everyone loves to watch. It's definitely not Yiddish and Nachas. Okay. That's right. To be a manager, maybe. No. But again, that's another question. Could you even be a manager for a boxer? Not sure. Not sure. It could be Lifnei Iver. But in any event, okay. So the im hisna imo mitchila. So the Rav Shulchan Aruch had said that if you make a condition of the person's hiring when you hired him, sheyihi rashai lahakoso kishalo yishma bekolo, that you'll be allowed to apply corporal punishment. You're allowed to strike him when he doesn't listen. In other words, you hire someone on the condition that if you don't listen, I get to give you I get to cane you, I get to zetz you. So mo'elis nasinas reshuso hol vihila tovaso kadeshi yiskarehu. Then such a conditional contract works halachically because he needs the work. So he'll take the job even though he knows that he's going to get stricken if he doesn't do the work according to the wishes of the employer. This doesn't seem right. There seems to be something wrong here. Basically, it's basically saying that if you make a condition with him that you do have a right to strike him when you hire him. I'm just thinking about like one of these movies with Paul Newman, what is that? Cool Hand Luke or whatever it was. All right, boy, you don't work for us, right? We're going to give you the whip. You hear me, boy? Yeah. Anyway, so whole vihila tova. So since it's beneficial to the employee, aval belav hachi lo mo'el nesinos reshus chemo shekasafti b'reish hasif. But if it's not beneficial for the employee, then you would never be allowed to strike someone if it's gratuitous or not beneficial, like we said at the beginning. And then, right? And then umikol makom im chazer bo hamisharis mitanai asur lahakoso. But if the employee says, "I've had enough of this. I'm not working for you anymore," then you're not allowed to strike them. Because anyone can quit even in the middle of the job. As we've written in the laws of employment, which we'll see later on. And furthermore, when it comes to physical pain, a person, a person is always allowed to back out of an agreement where he consented to be subject to physical pain if he realizes that he can no longer tolerate the pain. Kamosha Kosov Evan Ha'ezer Simin Ayin Vav Le'inyan Mechilas Ha'ona. And this is codified in Shulchan Aruch Evan Ha'ezer, which deals with laws of marriage, that a woman is allowed to say, I thought that I could tolerate the deprivation of conjugal duties, and I willingly consented to marriage. A guy says to a woman, I'm willing to marry you, but I'm not interested in sexual activity, right? And she agrees because she doesn't want to live alone. She's allowed to demand a divorce at some point, basically saying, I thought I could handle this, but I can't. In other words, because, right, she couldn't handle whatever, right? And that a woman is allowed to say that I want out, and I'm entitled to the ketubah. It's not like she's a moredes, like she's a rebellious woman because she wants a divorce. Because since the marriage was predicated on her accepting a deprivation of benefits which causes her pain, then she's allowed to back out. There's no such thing as a permanent abdication of my rights to comfort and to being denied pain. It's only a person cannot excuse me, a person cannot abdicate that permanently. It only lasts as long as they can tolerate it. Yeah. It's an interesting question because, it is more common, but it's more complicated. All right, on the one hand, I guess it would be up to a beis din to make that determination. So on the one hand, let's say a man is verbally abusive to his wife. He calls her stupid, he yells at her, and all of these other things, right? So clearly that's a case of abuse. But we have to be careful, because it's very subjective. What if a woman says, my husband is abusing me verbally because he doesn't say thank you when I bring him dinner, right? Or whatever it is. So it has to be something that the beis din can clearly recognize that there's abuse here. I'm only providing that caveat because I note in cases that I've worked with that sometimes people abuse the word abuse, and people use it improperly. So so to the point where it's become cliche-ish, we have to know when to apply it and when to not to apply it. Okay. So that's an interesting halacha, that the laws of marriage, if a woman, and here it's not that she's being subjected to pain, it's that she's being deprived of a basic physical need that all women have, which is to be provided with conjugal rights when they enter into a marriage. That's something that the Torah says, she'irak susava onasa lo yigra, that you're not allowed to deprive her of ona. The term ona means conjugal duty, and it's actually it's part of the thing that a husband agrees to when he enters into the ketubah arrangement also, that he's going to provide for his wife everything that she needs in the marriage: food, shelter, and conjugal duty. So if a woman is willing to forego that, to forego certain amenities in the marriage that she's entitled to by the Torah, she's allowed to back out of the marriage at any time and doesn't forfeit her ketubah. The same thing would be true is that if a person enters into a contract where they say, I'm willing to have basic deprivation of human treatment, and I give you permission to hit me if I misbehave, they're allowed to back out of that at any time. That's the comparison that he's making. Now, of course, remember,
Rabbi, just getting back to that thing there. How far does it go with the women's conjugal rights? Like, let's say, for example, as people are aging, and let's say getting into their 70s or what, and they're just not, whatever, for whatever reasons, it's just not happening. Does that woman hold those rights right through into her elderly age if she chooses to do so? She's in a different physical state than her husband or whatever.
It's an interesting question. I don't have an answer. I can only tell you that my mother just told me that she read on the news that Viagra is good for Alzheimer's. So that's all I can tell you. Did you read about that? Yeah. They just discovered that taking Viagra helps prevent onset of Alzheimer's disease. So, yeah. Yeah. So no, but in all seriousness, it's an extremely valid question. Obviously, as people age, their ability to perform and their ability to be, to receive the male it becomes more limited, and the couple obviously has to work together with each other and recognize each other's physical limitations, right? I did have a situation once where a woman came to me with a complaint that, and they were both, in their senior years, and that the man was more needy than his wife was at that stage in her life. She wasn't as amorous and desirable of physical contact as her husband was, and it was creating shalom bias issues. And I guess that has to be worked out. But as far as a halachic right, technically, a husband does have a right to demand accessibility to his wife unless she's a nida, which doesn't take place once a couple is older. But of course, if a woman says that she has pain during intercourse, that is a reason for her to deny her husband. She's not obligated to subject herself to physical pain. And so, but then they would have to go see a physician to find out how they can alleviate her pain, and perhaps even a therapist to determine how best to maneuver that kind of thing. Yeah, so it can go both ways, Ron. As a couple gets older, sometimes the man has a desire for more frequency, and sometimes a woman has desire for more frequency than what the man is capable to provide. And the Gemara discusses the amount of frequency that a woman is entitled to ask for. For a Talmud Chacham, for example, it's once a week. For certain other kinds of occupations where the man travels, then it's even less frequent than once a week. So, okay, there you go. I don't know if I fully answered your question. Okay, all right. I guess if there's any specifics, we can discuss offline. Okay. Next halacha. Let me make sure we've covered everything. Okay. Next halacha. Halacha hey. Hamavis is chavero kagon shetzoak lo me'achorav. If you frighten your friend, if you want to play a practical joke on a guy, so you're going to scare him, and so let's say you yell to his back when he thinks that there's no one around. You say, "Bah!" O shenira lo ba'afela, or you jump out of the darkness, or like it's a dark room, and you just, you grab him to scare him. And it's all a joke. It's all very funny, right? So v'chayotze bazeh, afal pi shepoter midinei adam chayiv b'dinei shamayim. So, the halacha acknowledges that there's such a thing as a practical joke, but the halacha does not have a sense of humor. In other words, if this is something that's going to cause your friend either emotional or physical pain, you could give a guy a heart attack, God forbid, by doing this. And so even though you are not going to be liable, midine adam, if you give a guy a heart attack and put him in the hospital, God forbid, but you'll be chayiv b'dinei shamayim, you'll be chayiv from a heavenly perspective. So the Imrei Yaakov writes as follows: Shetzak lo me'achorav, v'nechela mehapachad o shenas al yedei zeh cheresh. That let's say a person gets sick, physically sick because of the fright, or they become deaf or mute, I guess such a condition is possible. If, let's say, you take one of those foghorns, that they use at the games, and you blow it in your friend's ear, and you actually cause damage to the eardrum. So that also you'll be pater midine adam, kevin shelo asa ma'isa begufo v'lo nagabo avigrama ba'alma. And the reason why you're pater from being taken to Beis Din is because you did not touch his body. You only did something that was causative. So because it was causative damage, because you didn't have physical contact with him, it's called a grama. We've learned about the principle of grama before, that causative damage you cannot be held liable for in a Beis Din. Umikol makom chayiv b'dinei shamayim, kevin shenecherash b'sibasa, but you're still going to be held liable by God, because this guy has been impaired because of your practical joke. Aval im achso v'taka ba'ozno, but if you grab him and then blow the horn in his ears, o afilu hika bekosel keneged ozno b'nischaresh, or let's say you make a large noise by banging against the wall, or something that's very like a cymbal or something like that, and he becomes deaf as a result of that, then and you do that right by his ear, and he becomes a cheresh, so then chayiv b'tashlumin. So I suppose, I'm not sure why this is banging on a wall is any different. Let's see. He doesn't provide a reason. If you grab him and then blow in his ear, afilu hika bekosel keneged ozno. I guess you'd have to say that a guy was standing by the wall and you banged the wall that he was standing by. So maybe he was in physical contact with the wall. Okay, or if you touch him or push him while you're scaring him. Like I remember when I was in summer camp one year, they declared color war by pretending that there were bears, because our bunk was sleeping out in tents. So they just told us you have to listen out for bears. And then a guy dressed up in a bear suit came into our tent and started growling like a bear. And I woke up and I said, "What's that?" And I felt him, he grabbed my wrist and I screamed. It was like, that was the summer that Elvis Presley died. So I think it was 1976 or 77. Anyway, so in that situation, because he grabbed me, if God forbid he would have inflicted damage because of the fright, then he would be liable. Or even if he just grabs my clothing, he's going to be liable. So in other words, if there's no physical contact at all, he cannot be held liable in a Beis Din. But once there's physical contact, even if the cause of the damage is not because of the physical contact, but because he's engaged me bodily, so then he can be held physically liable in a mortal court. Chayiv b'dinei shamayim, he'll be held liable by God. V'hainu im asa b'kavana. but that's only if he did it intentionally. But let's say what often happens is two people are walking in a dark room and they bump into each other. It wasn't intentional. And the guy goes nuts. He's frightened out of his mind because he didn't think anyone else was there. Or you just walk into a room and you scare somebody. It happens all the time, but it's not intentional. So there you're going to be totally putter because you didn't do anything inappropriate. So even from a heavenly standard, you're not going to be held liable in a situation like that. Okay. So what's interesting is that society today, we're a bunch of practical jokers, right? So practical jokes. My kids even showed me there's a show on that they have on the internet about these five guys, these five friends from New Jersey that are their whole show is practical jokers, and the kids love it. It's like a big thing that you make fun of people and you scare them or whatever. And that's what gives people a lot of joy in life. It gives them a lot of entertainment. But if it causes someone damage, like they sustain injury because of that, because either it affects their heart or it affects their hearing or something like that, so then this is a violation of halacha. And in general, the halacha is not forgiving of someone gets a laugh at someone else's expense. That's the general rule in halacha. Okay, next, vav. Hachovel b'chavero afilu shelo b'kavana. If I injure someone else, even if it was unintentional injury, even if I've already compensated the person for what I owe them, for the injury that I've caused them, you still do not get heavenly atonement until you ask for forgiveness from the person and the person forgives you al-tzara for the pain that you caused them. The person has to, because you may have compensated them for, let's say you accidentally broke their arm. So you put them in the hospital, you paid for their hospital bill, you paid them for the damage that was caused, but you still have to get mechila. They have to say, I forgive you. V'lo yihiyah hanechval achzari milimchol, k'mo shekasuv b'Hilchos Yom HaKippurim. But the injured party should not be unforgiving. The injured party should be forgiving and kind to forgive, as is written in Hilchos Yom Kippur. Why is it written in Hilchos Yom Kippur? Because there's a whole siman over there. Many of us have learned it about the halacha that you have to appease your fellow before Yom Kippur, because the only way that Yom Kippur will atone is if Yom Kippur will only atone for sins between man and God, but Yom Kippur will not atone for sins between man and man. So therefore, you need to ask forgiveness from the person that you've injured, even unintentionally. And there, the Shulchan Aruch writes that the aggrieved party should not withhold forgiveness. Anyone who asks you for forgiveness, you should be as forgiving as you possibly can, unless you know that they're just going to go ahead and do it again. Okay. V'chein hagozel es chavero. And similarly, if you stole from someone, afal pi she'eshev es hagzela, even though you return the stolen item, ein miskaper lo, ad she'yavakesh mimenu, v'yimchalo al tzaro shetziaro k'shegazlo. Even if you return the stolen item, you can't say, well, I'm done, the courts held me liable to return everything that I stole from you, and so therefore I'm off the hook. No, you have to ask the person mechila because of the mental anguish and the suffering that person had to go through. by having their items stolen from them. Aval hamazik mamon chavero miyad sheshilim lo niskaper lo ve'ein sarach levakesh limcholo. But that's only when it comes to bodily injury or stealing. But when it comes to damaging someone's property, and we'll see if there's any difference whether it was done intentionally or unintentionally. But when you damage someone's property, you don't have to ask them mechila. You only have to make full restitution for, let's say, a kid swings a baseball bat, swings the bat, and the ball goes through the window, right? So then you're not obligated to do anything more than pay for the damage that you caused, and you don't have to ask mechila in that kind of situation. I suppose we'll see the reason in the Imrei Yaakov, but I suppose the reason is that there's been greater suffering when you cause bodily pain and when you steal from someone, right? But in this kind of situation, you're not causing significant anguish to the person by damaging their item, as long as you can make restitution for it. And as we'll see, it's still a mitzvah to ask him for mechila, but it's not an absolute obligation. No. Even if it's direct damage, even if it's direct property damage, you don't have to ask mechila. We'll have to look at this halacha more carefully, but we're out of time, so we'll pick this up in Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow. Okay? Have a good day, everybody. Are we having shir tomorrow?
Yeah. What about tomorrow?
I think I would recommend that we do. The fast starts at 6:30. So I'm going to be up anyway. I'm going to have a cup of coffee and a little breakfast. So I think it starts at 6:32, the fast. Well, that's right. Davening is at 6:32. So if you want to meet here at 6, we can hear at 6, or we can just do a shorter shir. A shorter shir? Okay, so we'll meet here at 6:10, and we'll learn for 20 minutes then.